Facebook page. Let me just read you a couple of these. Teresia Karapia Javorek says, I wonder if any of these societies have thought about the fact that eventually there'll be no women to carry children for their sons. Susan Oskan says, above anything else, the minds of Indian people about thinking that a girl baby is somehow a burden on the family has to change. Jenny Latif says, make dowries illegal first of all. Free or discounted prices for education, healthcare, etc. for girls. More incentives. Amir Syed says aborting female fetuses is both practical and socially acceptable in India. And he says female feticide is driven by many factors, primarily by the prospect of having to pay a dowry to the future bridegroom of a daughter. Sudanand, one of the big side effects of all of this, in fact, is that, of course, is that, you know, in some parts of India, there's a whole generation of young men growing up with no women to marry. I mean, there is a demographic crisis happening here, isn't there?
Yes, it is. It's quite remarkable. There are in some parts of India, for example, in Haryana, people are having to look for brides on the opposite end of the country, in Kerala, which is one of the few places that still has a positive gender balance. And so what you're seeing is something quite unprecedented because the brides have just dried up. And I don't see this getting better in the short term. I'm coming back to what needs to be done about this. You know, I don't have a problem with better implementation of the law, but we have to recognize that there are almost no laws in India that are properly or fully implemented. So what I think we have to sort of, in the meantime, we need to start thinking a little bit more creatively about other things. So for example, one of the things that's very difficult for middle-class parents to do in India is to get their children into kindergarten. And there's all kinds of sort of elaborate formulas that are in place to sort of, you know, how you weight it to allow your kids to get a space in kindergarten. If you could tinker with stuff like this, if you could sort of put in place really clear, practical reasons why it makes sense, why it's advantageous for you to have a daughter or more than one daughter, I think you're going to begin to make a dent. This is not going to happen overnight, but I think that to focus this purely on implementation of the law or on tightening the laws or on making the laws harsher would be a mistake.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know whether any of my guests will be surprised that despite repeated requests, we couldn't get anyone from the Indian government to come onto the programme and to speak about this. We did find a comment from the Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh back in 2011, who called for a crusade against the widespread practice of feticide and infanticide. He said, the falling child sex ratio is an indictment of our social values. Our girls and women have done us proud in classrooms, in boardrooms and on the sports field. It's a national shame for us that despite this, female feticide and infanticide continues. Mitu, is this a priority of the government? Does the government recognise this as a huge problem, and is it doing something about this?
I have written to the Prime Minister, I have written to the President, I wrote to the Chief Minister, I have approached all of them when I was trying to save my daughters. I have written to them multiple times and I have never received any reply or any help from them. I had twin daughters whom my in-laws were forcing me to abort. And when I wanted to save them, I wrote to all these people who were saying that it's a national shame. And none of them ever responded back.
Does that surprise you, Sudanand?
I think that's...
Well, I actually just, you know, I have to say that I disagree slightly with Mitu. I don't think the problem in India is a shortage of enlightened opinion at the top. There is enlightened opinion at the top. If you talk to top politicians, if you talk to Supreme Court judges, if you talk to leading journalists, I don't think you're going to sort of sit around and have a conversation with the most powerful people in India where they tell you that, you know, we think female feticide is a wonderful thing. The problem is not a lack of enlightenment at the very top. The problem is a lack of enlightenment in society at large. And the difficulty that people who do hold the right opinions, to have enlightened views, have in turning those into policies or incentives that can turn this around.
Suhas, do you agree with that?
No, I would say the government officials, including the Prime Minister, they're absolutely insensitive towards the issue. It's one thing to speak nice words in a national address or in a press interview. It's another thing to formulate the policy. At the moment, the government of India provides 2 lakhs rupees, that's about 200,000 rupees or about $5,000. If you have 2 children girl child, and that will be given after they turn 18. Now, that's not an incentive. If you provide 2 lakhs, after 18 years you get that. Is that an incentive that you are trying to convince people that it's, it's not a burden to have a girl child? No, that's not the way the government should look at it. A policy, if it is to discourage people from choosing boys, has to come immediately from the time when the girl child is born till she is 18 years. The system must provide support up to that level. If you do not provide any support system during this 18-year period, and the government announced that they will give 200,000 rupees after 18 years, that's absolutely nonsense. But nobody will die, or nobody will wait for 18 years to get 200,000 rupees and have 2 children. And at that time, when they become 18, you possibly can't even get married of these 2 girls with 200,000 rupees.
Mitu, do you think that Indian society's focus on the position of women there has been channeled by the dreadful gang rape case that happened in Delhi recently? Are people now talking about women's position in society and about discrimination against girls?
See, rapes have been happening over a long time, and yes, this gang rape has brought the people of the country to the roads. This has acted as an alignment. Though I'm very optimistic, I'm very happy to see the people coming out on the roads and saying that we want equality between women, we want their rights and everything. But we have to just remember that same time, same months last year also, we were very angered when there was a baby Falak who was killed to death by her father because he didn't want a daughter. There was a white rage protest, there was rage, but with time everything died out. So if we want this change to happen, this protest, this uprising, it has to be continuous. It has to maintain the level at which it is going on.
Because but what about the women who go along with this, Mitu? Because I mean, women, some women are put under a great deal of pressure to abort female children. But should we also be blaming the women who agree to go through this, or is that unfair?
Can you just please repeat?
Yeah, I'm asking about the women themselves who agree to abort female fetuses.
Yeah.
Are we right to excuse them for their action because they're under tremendous pressure from, I don't know, society or family or their husbands? Or should we be saying that these women themselves should be saying no to these procedures?
See, there is a social conditioning which is there right from the time a girl is born. When she is born, she grows up seeing her mother being beaten up by her father. She is eating last in the family. She is being insulted. She sees her brother getting priority over her. She sees her brother going to the schools while she is at home. She is being starved. So naturally, by the time she grows up, there is a big social conditioning that to be a son or to have a son is always better. You know, the social conditioning is always there. And second thing is that if a woman decides to say no, it many times results in her being turned out of the family, her having to leave the home, extreme violence against her. And with an insensitive authorities, the insensitive society, the judiciary, which always sees as a separated woman as a stigma, it's very, very difficult for a woman to fight back all these forces and say, no, I want to keep my daughters.
Sudanan, do you see things changing? Do things have to change? Because if they don't, it's going to be a bit of a disaster for India, isn't it?
I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic about the long term. I think what you have seen is a much greater public awareness, particularly among the middle class. As you correctly pointed out, this horrific gang rape in Delhi last month has also galvanized a larger national debate about the status of women more broadly. So I think that there's a sort of, there are positive signs over there, but much more needs to be done because in concrete terms, things are still quite bad.
And last word to Suhas quickly, do you agree with that? Are you optimistic that things are going to change?
No, not at all. I mean, if you look at this act, which was brought in 1994, and if you look at today, actually the number of girls have completely gone down, and it will go down further in the next 3 decades, or 4 decades. Now, at the end of the day, if the judiciary itself is insensitive, if the political leaders themselves are insensitive, and there are a number of cases where senior political leaders and the judges from the high courts demanding dowry from their daughter-in-laws, then obviously you cannot have a change in the situation.
It was a fascinating discussion. We've come to the end of it. Thank you very much indeed to Suhas Chakma, Mitu Khurana and Sudanan Dume. And that's it from us. If you have any views on any of our reports this week, tweet me at HackHound or email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. For the moment, from me, Shudi Ghosh. Bye for now.